So this is a sermon in two parts. The little sister goes first. Thank you. We need to stay together. Thomas Jefferson claimed that he was a Unitarian of one. Is that possible? Right answer. Some of you actually may think so and just not have had enough courage to say out loud yes. And I imagine that people claim some affiliation with us who never graced the doors of our congregations would not find Jefferson's assertion controversial. But as one of your guest preachers today, I want to let you know that I disagree with our founding father. To be a Unitarian Universalist, in my opinion, you have to be willing to forge your faith in the reality of a living, breathing community, a community dedicated to doing its best to live out our foundational values and our liberal religious vision. I believe in the transformative power of our liberal faith. It has held me in times of tragedy and struggle. It has walked with me in times of great joy and triumph. I have seen its power move mountains, change culture, communities. I do believe in its power, but I also am incredibly aware that our congregations are made up of human beings who by their very nature are unfinished and imperfect. Religious communities are aspirational. They are grounded in a vision of what the world can be, may be, what it is, what it can be when it is made whole. But they are also comprised of us, flawed and imperfect human beings. Quaker educator Parker Palmer refers to this as the tragic gap. And in his latest book, The Heart of Democracy, he describes the tragic gap between our democratic ideals and aspirations and the reality of our current democracy. Now, I would argue that that same gap exists in our religious communities. We invite people into the messy business of meaning-making right in this very gap between our aspirations and the reality of our religious communities. So a few years ago, some religious scholars and researchers decided to study the various Protestant religions in the United States. And what they wanted to do was to try and determine what was the salient aspect that differentiated each religion from one another. Are you curious at what they found as our defining characteristic? Okay. Any guesses? Not so true. Any other guesses? It was our ability to live with ambiguity. Our comfort with ambiguity set us apart from all other Protestant denominations. Think about that. So it is into the heart of this ambiguity that my brother and I invite you today. To be a member of a religious community can be incredibly rewarding, and it also can be disappointing, even heartbreaking. Buddhist teacher Sharon Salzberg, in the provocative and wonderful book entitled Faith, which I commend to all of you, describes the different stages we travel through in becoming deeply involved in a religious community. The first, bright faith. is best described at that moment when we know we have found a religious home. It's the moment we say to ourselves, these are my people. I've been looking for you all my life. And she argues that if our faith is not further tested or deepened, it can turn to blind faith, which is the faith of uncritical adherents who do not question or doubt. This is not generally a problem for Unitarian Universalists. But any minister knows the blush of early enthusiastic members. We just wait to watch the disappointment fog the rose-colored glasses, because we know that disappointment is inevitable. And that disappointment leads to questioning and doubts. These people, they hold up these purposes and principles, but they don't act like their lives are shaped and grounded in them. These people aren't the people they say they are. They say they're so friendly, but no one talked to me at coffee hour last Sunday. Strasberg describes this essential stage of disappointment, of doubting, as the stage of verifying. We have to question to find our place in community, she argues. We have to live through our share of disappointment, that readjustment of expectation that we all know so well. And if we do all this, then we can come to embrace our faith at a deeper level. And according to this model, we have now earned what she describes as enduring faith, a faith with which we have reconciled. And in the stage of enduring faith, we can recognize the shortcomings, but also the strengths. And at this point, our faith becomes foundational in our lives, guiding us forward. So my brother and I stand before you today as beneficiaries of communities of faithful people who stood by their faith, who believed in its power and possibility, and lived out that belief in how they treated one another and how they ordered their lives. Strong and vibrant congregations, no matter their size, have the ability to bring out the best in their members and to create a kind of synergy that impacts the wider community. And as they do so, all the lives of the community members are impacted, and that impact then goes out like ripples in the water to impact our larger communities. Our communities at their best make love visible and transform the lives of all of us by embodying that love. So when I was 4.5, I was brutally attacked by a bulldog. Now, there's a lot I could tell you about the story of the day when this dog attacked me. I can tell you that I was playing army with all the boys in the neighborhood. I was allowed to play because I was willing to be the nurse and the cook. We'll talk about that later. And they all went out on a convoy, and since I was a girl, I couldn't do that. I hope things have changed. But anyway, I'd never been told at 4.5 that when you look down the street and see a dog rushing towards you, that you're supposed to stand still. I'd never been told that, and it was counterintuitive. If I had been told, there's no way I would have stood still. Because what I saw was this mad dog rushing towards me. And so I took off and ran as fast as I could, and he attacked me, and his primary focus was my face. And I had, about 50 stitches, and I lost my 2 front teeth, and I had black eyes, and you can imagine what I looked like. So long story, my father saved me and threw the dog, and and got me to the hospital. Now, what's true is that I knew that when they put cloths on my face, it was nothing but blood. But I had no idea what I looked like. And what's true is in that hospital room, my church community of All Souls Church, Unitarian Church of Tulsa, Oklahoma, made me feel like queen for the day. They brought me gifts, and they made a cardboard crown with spray-painted gold, with glitter, with my name on it. And I felt so loved. And I was in the hospital for, it's my memory, 2 or 3 days. And on the last day that I was in the hospital, I looked into the mirror because I had no idea what I looked like until that moment. And I was horrified. And I remember thinking, why in the world didn't I know this? Why didn't I know that I looked like a nightmare? And I realized in my 4.5-year-old reality that they had seen something more important. That they had seen beyond the surface of things to the beauty that was inside me. And that's what they saw, and that's what they loved. And maybe it was that day I decided to go into the Unitarian Universalist ministry. I don't really know, but certainly I imagine that that's when the seed was planted, because it taught me something I have never forgotten about religious community, which is that they can love us back to health, and they can love us into being, and that they can see that divine spark when it is often invisible or obscured to our view. So communities have the power to recognize that inner beauty present in each of us. And they have the ability to call forth the best that is in all of us. And in so doing, the world is made a better place.
And so we are preaching about love, the transforming nature of what it means to seek and find connection and community, to be in love with gathering and being present to one another. But what I know about love is that inevitably, at some point, it breaks your heart. And so my intention, when I gather and help participate in creating community, is the hope that we will break our hearts open and love more deeply. If you truly give yourself to love, love is what you get back. But only by giving yourself to love. In part, we're talking about the spiritual discipline of community and connection, which is about primary relationships, it's about family, it's about extended family, it's about work community, it's about neighborhood, and it's about your faith community. What I say is being in community is, in fact, a spiritual practice. There are some of us who meditate in order to become more fully present to the moment. There are some of us who pray to name our fear and gratitude and to live with greater senses of acceptance of the moment and ourselves and the world. And there are some of us who move into community with intentionality, hoping that we will create a more whole world and a more whole self. Inevitably, when we're in community, as Jan talked about, there will be moments of disappointment where your hoped-for vision confronts the reality of the persons that you actually get to hang out with. Or another way of saying that is, if you really are in community, you cannot be in any community long time and not discover that you don't always like all the people around you. Or that some of them will actually make you angry or disappointed because they don't always agree with you. And those moments, I tell you, are not really about them, but about you. What I find is the people who usually irritate me the most, if I slow down and use them as a mirror to my soul, I discover in me the thing that I'm finding projected onto them. Uh-oh. Which then becomes an opportunity for personal growth as I try to integrate and better understand that. Which is to say that community can help be a mirror to our soul and a growthful opportunity, which is why I say to you that it is in fact a spiritual discipline, this learning to live with the mirror of community and others who help us understand who we are by reflecting that back to us. I once had a member in a new member class say to me, "Do you believe that congregational life changes us? Are you trying to change me?" And I said, yes and no. Yes, I believe that giving ourselves to something greater than ourselves is transformational. And it's not my agenda or the agenda of a community to try to change you. But if you are serving something greater than yourself, it will inevitably transform you. The point is to break your heart open. I have been working in religious community for 37 years. I have been promoting our faith with most of my adult life energy. And it's not about, for me, necessarily just promoting our faith. It's my primary value of community, connection, and humanness that I have given my life to. What I know is it's a wonderful journey. But it means that we have to be willing to listen to one another, to sometimes be disappointed. And so I want to tell you of a wonderful opportunity where I learned from a church member, a woman named Jean McCormick in my Kansas City All Souls Church, where I was for 10 years. Jean wanted to give her congregation a wonderful gift. And so she came to her minister and said, "I know Randall Kennedy, who is a Harvard law professor and has written a number of books, and he is wonderful. He is a great orator and a wonderful intellect, and he's written a book on interracial marriages, and we have interracial couples in our congregation, and about 10 to 20% of the congregation were people of color. And so this was a significant opportunity to help leverage the life of the congregation, and he's willing to come on that weekend," she said. Good, I thought. It is the opportunity that we have already committed to as a congregation for publicly doing a wedding for a gay couple in our congregation that had already picked that date. Well, she said, "Well, they can change the date." And I said, "Well, actually, Scott and Kelly told me that they had picked that date because that was the date that they met, and it's the anniversary of their meeting. And 1 year later, that was the date that Scott proposed to Kelly. And 1 year later, that's the date in which they were going to get married in our church. And we're not having two big church events in the same weekend. I'm sorry." Well, you know, when you, as a minister, get to disappoint one of your most powerful lay leaders, this could be difficult. And so Jean says to me, and I am a little bit concerned, she says to me, "Jim, I just wanted to give a gift to the congregation, and if you don't want my gift, that's okay. I'll find a different way to give and give differently and still give more." Bless her. Bless her. And she said, "And I'll come to their wedding." And she came to Scott and Kelly's wedding and sat central and smiled the whole while, and people noticed. And a year later, Randall Kennedy came to All Souls Kansas City and did a riveting weekend with us and transformed the congregation, drawing hundreds of people from the community into our church who would not have been there otherwise. What I know is that Jean knew that the gift that she wanted to give was not about her, but was about what is best for the life of the congregation, and she wanted to serve its welfare, not her ego. Bless her heart. And what I know is if you're a good minister, you listen to the leadership of your church and learn from them and are transformed by that. She was one of my great teachers. Community is about connection, about the spark of the Spirit becoming present among us and between us. Martin Buber calls this I-thou relationship. One of the great Jewish theologians. He said, it's so much in society we have I-it relationships. People are means to an end, not their full humanness. That objects become objects rather than sacred presences in an I-it relationship. But an I-thou relationship, one's full humanness and the full humanness of another are present. And when we are in that place, a spark of the Spirit becomes present that is holy ground. On the front of your order of service, there are hieroglyphs that may be curious to you. They could have been X's and O's, but it was easier if it was X's. One X is one person plus another X, another person connect. And when they connect deeply, the final one is a spark becomes present. That Buber called the mystical in-between. He referred to himself as a believing humanist. And that in-between spark he defined as the holy. It is not to say that we are for each other God and that we should worship each other, but to say that we each bring the divine spark with us, and when we connect in that way, the holy becomes present. Indeed, I believe it is so, and hope that that is what you find when you come here in community. And I could preach for another half an hour, and would love to, however. I would like to have us turn now for our closing hymn, but I want to tell you a little bit about that hymn. This hymn comes from the Oakland Unitarian Universalist Church and was the theme song of my sister and brother-in-law's ministry when they served that congregation. They proposed the song to the hymnal commission, who decided to edit it and change the hymn and take out several verses. Much to my sister's outrage and dismay, you will find it the way it's supposed to be almost on an insert in your order of service, and I would invite you to turn to that insert. And please join in the hymn, standing and singing as you're able.
Love will guide us, peace has tried us, hope inside us will lead the way on the road